The Holy Gospel according to Mark, the 9th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Jesus and the disciples went on and passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples, saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying and were afraid to ask. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent, for on the way they had argued with one another who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. It never seems to matter how much I prepare, how much I study, how much I think about something. There always has to be that moment when something finally clicks and all the pieces fit together. Sometimes when I'm talking about preparing a sermon, it doesn't necessarily click as soon as I would like it to. Well, that moment for this sermon today happened yesterday. It happened yesterday as we were driving back from Osage Beach, having taken a short little trip there to run some errands. There was a billboard with a picture of a child with big letters that's read, "Little kids make big messes." Of course, what stood out were those words, and then by that time we had zoomed past the sign, and I tried to even remember who had sponsored that billboard and why it was there. I think it was some parenting organization. But for me, those words popped out because of this text we have before us today. I've been trying to figure out how to put all those pieces together. There's so much going on in this gospel lesson, but it is still all so connected. Just like life itself, nothing happens within a vacuum. Everything in life is connected. Our struggles are usually about how we live the life that happens. We can plan, we can prepare, we can lay out our goals, and we can ignore it. But life goes on. Sometimes as we planned, sometimes as we hoped for, but often surprising us, and too often shocking us, reminding us that not all things can be controlled. It is what the disciples are facing in today's gospel text. Jesus has just told them about death, specifically his death. He's just told them that he will be killed, not just die, but he will be killed. And then, as if to completely confuse them, he says, "And on the third day he will rise again." And the next thing that this text tells us is, but they did not understand what he was saying, and they were afraid to ask. Now, I understand that. They've been adjusting all this time to everything this man has been doing and everything this man has been teaching them. They have seen miracles. They have watched people come from miles and miles away. They've given up their own lives in many ways to follow him. I'm sure that along the way they've been ridiculed by their friends and maybe not their friends as to why they're following this outrageous man. And now this follower, this person that has kept them together, says he will no longer be with them. What do you mean you will be killed? You already know that? And then you're going to rise again? What is he saying? So it makes sense that there was a buzz of conversation among themselves. And I would also say there was a growing fear among them as well. If our leader is gone, what will we do? Who will lead us? Who will be responsible for us? Which one of us will it be? You might say they were in the midst of a leadership debate. Does that sound familiar? Well, much like a presidential campaign, these 12 men have ideas about how things should be. If you remember where they were taken from, the different lives that they lived before this time, they represent a lot of different people, a lot of different ways of thinking. They have different perspectives on the changes they believe should happen. Their lives have each been affected in different ways. There's a range of ideas among these men. And so therefore there is a debate of who should be the leader or which one is the greatest, which idea would be the most important to keep them together. But Jesus brings all that conversation to a halt. He completely changes the direction. First of all, he reminds them that living and leading is about serving. Are you willing to be the last one? Are you willing to be the servant of all? Now, sure, everybody we know that serves in any particular way always claim to be servants. They're public servants. But I would dare say we still want it our way, even when we say it's the best for all people. And Jesus knows this. So then he makes the grand point in another totally different way with a child. He picks up a child and brings it right in the middle of the circle, right in the middle of this grown-up conversation, right in the middle of a conversation about life and death. We all know the story really well, don't we? How Jesus blesses the children. And I'm going to admit that whenever I think about those passages, I think about I have these images in my mind of obedient, quiet, angelic children, just like the ones pictured on our bulletin cover. Perfect children, quiet babies, just like all our children here at St. Paul's. But you and I know, if we are honest, that children are not quiet and they are not still. When they are hungry, they cry, and that may be at 10:30 in the morning. When they have begun to move around and experience freedom of movement and getting places, they do not want to sit still. They need to discover everything, and usually in their mouth. They drool. They grab. They make messy diapers. They are demanding. Little kids make big messes. But they also learn. They also discover. They also explore. They teach. And they love. Now, I wonder why a child was so important at this moment in the story. I keep wondering why Jesus did this at the times that he did. And then I realized everything is about children. If there are no children, there will be no future. And this is what an 85-year-old man reminded me on one of those days at the Holy Innocents of the Screaming Children Church, which we often called our congregation in Lawrence, Kansas. It had been a trying day. About 7 of the age 2 and under children were all having a rather complicated morning. right at sermon time. Of course, they didn't all start at the same time, but one by one they entered, and with each one it got louder. Now, as one by one entered and got louder, I got louder too. We had no microphones. We had no public speaking system. So I used my marching band teacher voice, and I got louder and louder and louder until I realized that I looked at all the people, the adults sitting out there, and they all had these grins on their faces, kind of body starting to move, and I realized nobody was listening to anything. And so I quit, and I just laughed with everybody else. And we all took a breath, and we waited, and then we went on. Well, on his way out of church that morning, Edgar Feldy, who was 85 at the time, I thought this man would be very angry about all the noise because he had a very pious approach to his religion. But these are the words he said to me. If you cannot hear the sounds of children during worship, your church is dying. Jesus puts a child in their midst because what we do, what we decide, and how we lead is about the children. Our children are affected by every decision we make. When a farmer gleans the harvest, they're just not thinking about that moment and that crop. But they are thinking about how to prepare the land for the next planting. So it is with our church, our community, our state, our country, our world. Every decision we make in this church and have made in this church has affected the lives of children for over a century. Our decisions, our directions, our mission will impact children today and will continue to impact children in this place. Many of you are here today because decisions were made that provided you a place to learn, provided you a place to worship. Decisions were made to support your growth through Junior Lutherans, Luther League, Bible camps, youth gatherings, encounter schools. Decisions were made to invite you to the Lord's table more often and at younger ages. And we have more decisions that have to be made to continue to teach and support our children as they daily deal with the complexities of life. We cannot quit. Regardless of your age, our mission is to our children and has to remain the center of the decision. Because I'm convinced that in welcoming the child, welcomes the one who sent Jesus into our lives. And when we place a child at the center of every decision we will make in this place, in our cities, in our states, in our nation, and in our world, we will make it a better place for everyone, young or old. You see, we are all children of God. Amen.